live.
Okay, cool. Any introductions I should worry about, Michael, or should I just kind of get into it?
Well, we'll wait a few minutes
Okay.
to let people stream in. Make sure your Unity thing stays on screen, by the way. I can see your...
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we usually wait a few minutes. I won't wait too long here. We'll just wait till 32 or 33, I suppose. Okay. Yeah, once that's finished, just give you a quick little introduction since you're a new face here at Bit Project. And yeah, after that, we'll just go ahead and get started. In the meantime, though, to those of you tuning in, like I said, if you didn't catch it, we'll be just waiting 1 or 2 more minutes, just to let people flow in. Yeah. How you guys doing? Both you, Jason, and Jacob, and you guys in the chat.
I'm doing well. It's been a busy week, but it's a nice end to the week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel
it
that.
was pretty busy, but it ended on a good note, so.
Anything fun or exciting happen?
I learned how to manipulate images in various ways. And then, and part of that, with my mistakes, I also got some pretty cool images.
That's cool. Is that in Photoshop or something? Or
no, I was using C++.
All right.
I was given a lot of framework code with that, but still focusing on like the actual changing pixel by pixel, so I can like get grayscale images. I can blur or sharpen images, all that sort of stuff.
Was this for that graphics class, Jason?
Yeah, it's Fundamentals of Graphics 1, 5607.
Cool.
All right, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay.
So,
cool.
Yeah, I'll just lead off. Hi guys, welcome back to our GameDev BitCamp here. This is week 5 of 7. Hopefully, you should be meeting with your mentors by now and starting to work on your individual projects. Today we are back with University of Minnesota Twin Cities here, and we've got a new face from their Game Dev Club to help us out. Hey Jacob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Jacob. I'm one of the officers for Video Game Development Club at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Yeah, with Jason.
Yeah, so as per usual, I will pop out here. I'll hand it over to Jacob. Jason, do you want to stay on screen, or do you want to...
I will also pop out unless Jacob needs me for anything.
All right. And I will look into chat periodically and pop back in if there are any questions or anything. So don't worry about that, Jacob.
Okay, cool.
Take it away.
All right, sweet. All right. Hello, everybody. Last week, we're on the second week of UI. Last week, Jason showed you to do the game over screen and the main menu selection. That used a lot of like buttons, some text elements. We're going to be reusing some of those for this today, but we're also going to be messing with some other stuff like UI grid layout components, and just sort of like displaying like a bunch of like the same objects, like a bunch of buttons and sort of a grid shape. So yeah, and also we're going to kind of be going over how just like some kind of best practice stuff for pausing your game, because we're going to have it pause the game. And this is a pretty simple game, but there's stuff you want to keep in mind for what kind of processes you want to stop and what you don't want to stop when you pause. So we're just gonna I can just go over that a little bit. Yeah. I guess they're the starter kits that you guys should all have. I have the finished one right here. I'm going to show you guys what it's going to look like. The inventory is not going to be filled with pill bottles. That's just kind of a placeholder image. So you can actually see this. You can see the game like this. You can pick up items like you would. But if you press I, we have this inventory that shows up, and as you can see, that book and scroll that I picked up are in the inventory, and they can actually be selected and deselected, so you can like equip and unequip items. And so yeah, if you press I in your games, nothing's going to happen. So we're going to be making that menu, how it pauses, and then how to interact with it. All right. This is probably what you see when you open up your the file that I had sent out. All right. So firstly, we're gonna create a pause. We're gonna create a script called pausing. So this is gonna take care of like the basic sort of pausing functions, and we're gonna add stuff to it periodically as we work on the game, as we like add stuff to the inventory, because we're gonna have to make sure some other functions are happening when we're pausing and unpausing. But at the start, here, we're just gonna have it, pause. And so when it comes to pausing, your game, you want to like, it's kind of, you can't really disable everything. So you kind of want to, think about what you want to enable and what you don't want to enable. So like, I know with tags, I've used tags in Unity. If you disable objects by tag, you can't re-enable them very easily by tag. So I don't recommend that method. And so the only objects we're going to need to like stop moving are like, we're going to need to disable the player mouse movement script. And we're going to need to disable the player keyboard movement script. But basically, like, you can still group stuff using layers, but yeah, don't use tags because that doesn't really work too well. So to start out here, I guess yeah, I can show you what I mean by disabling and enabling objects as we get in here. And I'm just going to be doing that without using layers or tags. All right, so we're going to create a public bool paused. And it's going to start out as false because we're not going to start the game up paused. Then we're going to create a public player movement object, and this is a script that already exists. This is going to be referencing the player movement script in the player object, and then also public move view, and this is going to be disabling the mouse movement script. All right, and then so. Firstly, we can create this avoid method called update when pause unpause. All right, it's kind of a long name, but I thought it was the only one I could find that kind of helps explain what it's going to do, because it's just going to update a bunch of Boolean values based on whether the game is in a pause state or not, whether that pause bool is true or not. So firstly, we're going to check if pause is true. We're going to set the cursor lock state, and so this isn't like a part where you have to like disable a certain script, but this is important for menus, and especially if you want to do like a first person kind of game. You're going to want to keep an eye on the cursor lock mode. So if I have a cursor lock mode to none, so as you can see when I play the game, my cursor disappears, and then I look around and I don't have to worry about where my cursor is, because it's supposed to be at the center, and it locks it at the center actually when you do lock, but it also makes it invisible.
Popping in for a second, somebody in chat was wondering if you could zoom in your screen a little bit.
Oh, sure, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. Do you want me to like blow up the text here?
Yeah, that's probably good. As in a good idea. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, sweet. Thanks, Michael. Okay. All right, yeah. So when your cursor lock state is is locked. That's what it does. So, that's what you're going to use for like a lot of first person stuff. Not all first person stuff, but, basically whenever you have like a reticle in the middle, you're going to want that. And then, so currently we have this set to none. So when the game is paused, you're going to be able to move the cursor as you would normally. There's actually a third option that we're not going to be using, but it's actually confined. And that like lets you see your cursor and you can move it around, but it's confined to the limits of the game window. That could possibly be kind of annoying if you were experiencing problems with your game and like you couldn't get out of it. But there definitely are times where you want to use that, but they're in the minority compared to the other two. So yeah, because we're going to want to be able to access the buttons. So we're going to set it to none. And then else, we're going to set the cursor lock state to locked. All right. All right, and so now we're gonna reference these player movement and move view scripts. So player movement equals, we can just do this all in one line. So player movement equals move view equals the opposite of pause. So exclamation mark pause. And so that basically they're gonna be set to the whatever. Oh, whoops. Yeah, we're gonna want to put enabled here. And so, yeah, here's what I was talking about earlier. When it comes to like enabling and disabling objects. So when you're enabling or disabling an object or a component individually, you're gonna have they either have like a variable or a method that you use to set that. And so for components, for game components, so the ones you see in the inspector over here, you can do .enabled, and then you can just set it to false or true. And so, right here we have it set to whatever the opposite of paused is. But in the case of like game objects, so let's just say let's just make up some kind of game object. We're gonna be using this later. You would use a method called setActive, and then you put the Boolean inside of the parentheses. That's like passed into the method. So like that's how we would do it if we were wanting to disable or enable an object. But since we don't want to do that, we're going to do this for now. And then we're going to use that setActive thing later. But yeah, just a little difference between how components and objects work. All right. So now, now we can we can go back and make those start and update functions. All right. So then when the game starts, we're going to have it update when pause, unpause. And this kind of goes against like the naming terminology I used, but this is the only exception. We're just going to have it run when the game starts, even though it's not going to be pausing or unpausing. It's just going to initialize these values. And it seemed like kind of neater than just copying that code and pasting it to start. All right. And then for update, we're going to check for some keyboard input to there's going to be we're going to have like a pause button that will invoke this method. So we're not going to be using like the game controller input stuff. We're just going to be looking for a key down because that's kind of easier to mess around with for a tutorial. You can do whatever key you want. I did I for inventory. It's kind of like not used that often, but it used to be. And then okay, so yeah, so get key down keycode.I. You do dot, and then you can there are various other key codes. All the letters would have their letter like capital as their key code. All right, and so then when we press this button, when we're paused, we're going to want it to unpause, and when we're not paused, we're going to want it to pause. So we're just going to set paused to the opposite of itself, of what it currently is. And then we're just going to call that function. And then so basically, we are we're flipping the booleans the other value, and then we're just going to run all these again just to make sure these all get updated with it. All right, and we can go to the game manager here. and we can drag this in. And so now we got to put these player movement and move view scripts in. The player movement is in the player object. So if you just drag that over here, you can the script will automatically be put to that because it's a component of that object. And then the main camera, which is a child object of the player, just drag that into the move view. And now if you play it, walk around, press I, and then we can't use the keys or the mouse to move around. And then you can see as when you press I, you can move the mouse freely around your screen. But otherwise, you can't see it, and you just move your camera around. Oh, okay. That's all right. Don't worry about that. That'll be fixed by the end of this tutorial. All right. So now we're gonna start setting up the canvas. So we're gonna be making what visually and what kind of interactive elements of this inventory are going to be. So when it comes to setting your canvas, I know Jason talked about some of this last time, but there's the screen space overlay. Screen space overlay, it goes your UI. So if we just click on the canvas, we can see you're going to probably want to click on 2D mode, which is up here. That way you can interact with your canvas head on. You don't have to look at it from a weird angle because it's going to show up as flat 2D. So you're not going to want to have it's not very convenient to work with that in 3D. So yeah, when it's a screen space overlay, it overlays the screen no matter what. Screen space camera, it's camera dependent. So it overlays everything on the screen, but it just depends on you can switch cameras, and so maybe you want to have a certain camera have this certain UI, so you can switch, and they'll have different elements on there. And then world space would be something like if you know the inventory from Dead Space, it'll actually so if you go into the 3D mode, this actually has a physicality to the world. It's just kind of it's thin, but you can see where it is. And so that's what world space is. So if you want to have UI-esque elements and you want to have them in the world, you can do that. And as far as I know, buttons can still be interacted with raycasts, but I haven't messed with that very much. I've mostly just stuck to these. We're going to be using screen space overlay. We're not going to have any sort of fancy camera or world stuff here. All right, and then for canvas scaler, I actually have this all set up, but this is kind of an important thing to look at. There are 3 options here, and I have it set to scale with screen size, which I find useful most of the time because if you have a constant pixel size, depending on if you change, so we can change our aspect ratio here, and that's if it's a constant pixel size, it's not always going to be sitting perfectly within the screen. It might get cut off if we're at too low of a resolution, which I mean for a lot of games, HD is going to be fine now. So there definitely are times we might want to use it where you maybe have a certain pre-rendered UI that you want to use. Constant physical size. This is based on how areas of the screen. I haven't messed with this much before, but that could definitely be useful as well. Similar to what I was saying, if you want to have a certain pre-rendered UI element. Scale with screen size. This is easy for us because no matter what we change our aspect ratio to, it's going to scale. And there's actually this screen match mode, which actually is really important. The reference resolution isn't a huge deal. I haven't had a huge deal with it. And this is going to be a square kind of UI, so we don't need to worry about that too much. But if you have more width dependent elements, you might want to look into that more. So yeah, there's a screen match mode. Match width or height. it's at match width or height by default, but it actually is dragged over all the way to width. And so for auditorial, our UI is actually pretty thin, but it touches the top and bottom of the screen. So if you drag this all the way over to height, then it'll only scale by height. And so no matter like how like thin like the aspect ratio is, it'll still touch the top and bottom because we're not gonna. I mean, if you have a phone game, you might want to do something like that. If you put it in the middle here, it'll scale equally. So if you have it at 0.5, it'll scale equally, which could be really useful. But for our tutorial, setting it to 1 is going to be totally fine. All right. So I not only got that covered. All right. So yeah. So now in our canvas, we have this little action text thing. This is just to like know when you picked up an item. And yeah, currently we can't do that right now. But we're gonna like throw a script in that'll change that at the end. All right, yeah. So we're just gonna create a new empty object, and then we're gonna call this pause menu. This is gonna be kind of like a parent object to the rest of the actual UI objects, but this is gonna make it easy to enable it and disable all the elements that we want. Because we're gonna have a few UI elements, and so if we just disable this parent, it'll disable all the children of it. All right. So now we're gonna create a child of this pause menu object called title panel. Oh, whoops. But it's not gonna be an empty object. It's gonna be a UI object. We're gonna create a panel, and let's call it title panel. All right, and so as you can see, we have this little panel right here. It's just you know, a square right now, but this is going to be like, if you saw in like my final version, there's like a name bar that kind of says inventory on top, just because like it looks a bit more, I don't know, it like looks like not quite like an inventory when I didn't have it on there. So we're going to set this. So if you have it set to like, this is the default option for these. It's not going to matter a ton since we have that scalar set, or like I said earlier. But this is going to stretch it relative to like the width and height of the screen. But if you have it anchored to a certain part, it changes its position, but not its its dimensions. So this is a useful thing. No, because I used to use UI a bunch, and then I would have like a bunch of goofy looking UI because I didn't know how to use those anchor things correctly. All right, and so for this object, we can set its width to 500. Wait, no, that's not it. Width to 300. Yeah, that looked like a bit much. And then height to 770. So I got the values like set up already because messing around with those can be a bit tedious and time consuming. All right, and then the position is going to be, we're just going to modify the Y position, 256.697. And these don't have to be exact. You can just get them pretty well, but these are what I had. These are the values I had in my final version. All right, so as you can see, that's going to be where it's going to say inventory. Let's create a child object of that. And then text Mesh Pro. Jason talked about Text Mesh Pro last time. It's just like way more versatile than regular text. Oh, the old text is basically like a legacy thing. There's not really much of a reason to use it. It's not very good. They only have it so like old games won't break, I think. And then you can just make this look nice. I'm gonna like give it like an outline font, center it in alignment on the horizontally and vertically. I mean, you don't have to make it look that nice. It's like whatever. Not even if that that doesn't even look that nice, but it doesn't matter if it's maybe a little off in terms of centeredness. All right, and so now, yeah, this is just a little kind of aesthetic thing. Now we're gonna add another panel object. And this one's going to be, we're going to call this one inventory grid, because this is what's going to have that grid in it. It's also going to have the background panel for it. All right. So for this one, we're going to want to anchor it to the center. The width is 500, height is 500, and then its Y position is negative 37.2. All right. You can kind of see the shape it's kind of making now. Oh, that's not a child of pause menu. Or yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's a child of pause menu. All right. So yeah, now we're going to be adding a grid layout component. So if you just go, add component, we can look up here, a grid layout group. So we're going to want the grid layout group. It's not the purple one. It's like the gray 4 squares one. Oh, not entitled panel. We're going to want that in inventory grid. So sorry, yeah, inventory grid. We're going to want to add the grid layout group, not in title panel. All right, and as you can see, we can't really see anything here right now. So we can add some elements. Let's add a button object to this. It doesn't need to be a text mesh pro or a text, because we're actually going to delete the text from this button. All right. And so then if we start messing around with these values, we can just make a few copies of it. All these values, you can use to mess around. So like these are going to decide how big the buttons are, how far they're spaced from like the edges of like the grid dimensions, and how far spaced they are from each other. Cell size, we're going to want to change that to 80. We're going to want to change this to 80. And make them a bit smaller. And then for spacing, we're going to have 10 pixels on the X direction and 10 in the Y. And this is not going to be touching the corner. So if you click down on like the padding little drop down menu, if we add 30 to the left and 30 to the top, then we got a nice kind of margin around here. And so we're not just going to have 4 buttons. We can just take one of these, and we're actually going to make this. We're going to make this into a prefab object. We're going to call this button inventory slot, because this is where items from the inventory are going to be shown. So we call it inventory slot. All right. And then as a child of this object, we can actually make an image element. So if you go to UI and then you go to image, not a ton to say here for image components. We're going to change the dimensions. We're going to actually change the width to 60 and the height to 60. And we can actually add so if you go into the image component in this object, we can add just one of these, and it doesn't really matter what you add. We can just add like some item image. Let's see what looks good. I want to choose like a flashlight, because this highlights something kind of important. So as you can see, the flashlight's like stretched. We have the width and height 60, but like I don't want my flashlight looking like that. So if you click preserve aspect down in the image, then it looks a lot nicer. And so we can just use this as our placeholder image object. So now go to the prefabs folder. You can just drag this inventory slot into the prefabs folder. We can delete the rest of these buttons. And then we can just copy this inventory slot. We can just copy this until we get 25 of them, because that's how many we have room for on this menu. All right. We don't need to worry about these arrows, because that's for using buttons. And we're going to be accessing this with a mouse. So, all right, we have those, but we can't use them yet. So we're going to create a script for these inventory slots to behave, the way we're going to want them to for this inventory UI. And then we can just call this script inventory slot. All right. And so firstly, since we're going to be accessing the image component, because we're going to want to change that based on what item is in the slot, we're going to be wanting using Unity Engine .ui, because otherwise, if it wasn't accessing that library, we wouldn't be able to access it. It wouldn't know what the image components were that we're going to be referencing. All right. So you're talking about the image object. We're going to create a public image icon, and that's going to be that child object that we added earlier. We're going to add a game object that is held item. And this is going to be referencing that item that's like attached to the player. So this is going to be changing that image based on what item is currently equipped. And then we're just going to access that by name, so we don't need to make that public. And then we're going to create an item. So this doesn't need to be public. And then item isn't actually a scriptable object that I made for this inventory system. So if you go to the items folder in the assets, you can see a bunch of these things. And these are scriptable objects, and these are like a really useful Unity thing. If you want to have like a bunch of similar objects that kind of like fill a similar role, but you want to kind of have different values that are kind of modular. Good for inventory stuff, good for like various like opponents or character units. Currently at VGC we're using these right now for a game we're working on. So we have a lot of kind of little different enemy values and stuff we want to be modifying, so they're good for that. All right. Okay. So firstly, we're not going to be using start. We're going to actually, we can just take this out, but we're going to be using a similar function. It's going to be called awake. And this is actually called before start. You usually are going to want to use awake when you're referencing variables within the game object. And then you use start to access variables that are outside of the game object that the script is a part of. And the reason for that is because at the start, you're going to want to access a bunch of values, but awake can make sure that before you start having all these object start functions are going to be going, but they're not going to, they're going to be going, you don't know what order they're quite happening in. So you're going to want to have certain values instantiated before that. And so awake is kind of a way, all the objects awake functions are called before all the object start functions are called. And so that's why this is useful. It's not necessary here, but I just thought I would explain that. That's what I usually do for this. So held item is going to equal game object dot find. You might have used this before. Game object dot find is you can find an object via like using a string for its name. So just type in held item. That's the name of the object we're going to be referencing. So we can it'll find that. All right. And then so next we're going to create a function called public void slot filled. And then we're going to have it's going to be passed an item object. And we can just call this new item. I capitalize the I there. All right. And so this is going to be called whenever we pause or unpause, it's going to run through all of the slots, the inventory, and then it's going to check if there's an item in it or not, and then it'll change the button accordingly. So if the slot filled function is called, there is an item in the inventory. So we can set item equals new item. And so that the item then equals that item. The icon sprite equals item icon. So that's going to be changing the sprite of our icon child object, our image child object. And so as you can see, it's an image object, but we still have to do dot sprite. And that's because there are going to be other variables and methods you can access from the image object. So it might seem a little redundant, but yeah, you still have to do dot sprite. Otherwise, you're turning this component into an image object, and that's not going to work. Yeah, because you could do like dot like various values for that. All right, and then we're gonna set icon dot enabled. We're not gonna want that like flashlight image showing. So and then if it doesn't show the flashlight, it has like a white square. So we don't want that either. So then we just set icon dot enabled equal to false. All right, so next we're creating a pretty similar function. We're going to create public void slot clear, and there's doesn't need anything passed into it. Basically, like kind of the opposite. We're going to set item equal to null. Icon dot sprite equals null. Wait, whoops. Yeah, you want that icon enabled dot true here. Or icon enabled equals true here. And then icon enabled equals false in the slot clear method, because we're not going to want that white square or flashlight image showing up. All right, and next we're going to create another method called onPressed, and this is going to be when we press the button. This is going to kind of equip it or unequip it, and kind of send that to like the held item object. All right. And then we're going to do an if statement. If held item dot get component, and then you put sprite renderer in between these kind of brackets. And then again, this is an image object, which is pretty similar. So the held item is still a game object, so we're going to have to say get component because it has a sprite renderer on it that is showing the game's item. And then you do dot sprite, and then not equals icon dot sprite. So if it's not equal to the icon of the button that's being pressed, we can just copy this actually. We can set that equal to the icon sprite, so then it'll be changed to whatever is on the button. And then otherwise, if it does equal the icon sprite, then we're just going to set it to null, so you can like unequip the item. So this is all affecting that image object that you have in your hand, that sprite renderer, which is kind of like an image, but it can act separate of canvases and kind of has like some different like scale qualities to it. Better if you're using a lot of like physical sprite objects, especially also if you're doing 2D games, you want to use this a lot. All right, so now we can exit Visual Studio for now. And then we can go back into our prefab folder, the inventory slot prefab. If you go into the inspector, when you click on the prefab, you can click open prefab, and because we're going to be making these changes to all of the inventory slot objects that we have. So we just drag this inventory slot script into the inventory slot. All right, and then for the icon, we'll drag that image child object into here. And then if we leave, now if we go look at this, all of these are going to have on the inventory slot, and then it's going to have their own image is going to be dragged into that little field there. All right. Okay. Yeah, we're actually going to want to go back into that prefab. It has a button component, so we're going to want to call that onPressed function. So in the button component here, which is in the main inventory slot object, there's an on-click at the bottom, and it says list is empty. So you can click plus in the corner of this little box, and then it needs an object that it's like getting the method from, or a component. So you're gonna want to drag this inventory slot script right into there, right into that field. And so now we can call a method from inventory slot. So these are like a bunch of like kind of default Unity ones, but on pressed is going to be kind of right around here in the middle. So click on pressed, and then that will now run that when you click on the button. All right, so yeah, as you can see, we can play the game, but our screen is being covered with this menu. It doesn't really, yeah, it's here, but all we can do are equip and unequip flashlights, and we're going to want to have it so that you can, see your items be added to it and stuff. So we're going to want to go back into pausing because we're going to want to change a few values here. All right, so we're going to want to add a new variable up here, public game object pause menu. And this is going to be the pause menu object, that empty object that is like a parent object to all of our UI elements. And so we add that, and then in update when pause unpause, right around here where the player movement and move view are being enabled or disabled, we can set the pause menu. And so here's one of the situations where we want to use set active because this is a game object we're enabling or disabling. So set active, and then put paused, not the opposite of pause, just paused in there, and that'll pass whether pause is true or false. It'll pass that into here because we're going to want the pause menu to show up when pause is true, and then disappear when it's false. So we can go back into our game manager object, and now we have this pause menu field. So we can drag that pause menu canvas object in here. All right, yeah, and so now we can we have this only show up now when we it won't obstruct your view when you're playing the game otherwise. All right, now we're going to create our final script of the tutorial. We're going to go back into pause one more time after this to do just one more little thing like that. But now we're going to be making an inventory UI script, which is going to be placed in the pause menu object. And this is going to be kind of controlling, because I have an inventory system set up, but currently it's not going to be represented with these buttons. So with this, we're going to be able to show that. So we can call it inventory UI. All right, and so this script is also going to be using the Unity UI package. We're going to be also modifying image. All right, these kind of variables we're going to kind of have at the start. We're going to create a public transform required for all game objects. It's easy if you just want it to like access mostly at like its position. It's how you affect the game's position or the object's positions in the space and where it's child objects and kind of where it is in the hierarchy. So if you want to access those more than the game object components, that's probably what you want to do instead. All right. And then we're going to be inventory. Inventory. So we can just call it inventory without capital. And then this is referencing a singleton structure I have for the inventory script. So we're just going to be referencing that briefly. So get those images showing up. And then we're going to create a transform array. So transform and then these square brackets. Oops, no. And then we're going to call it slots. All you need to do to declare this just to kind of get the name declared and stuff. Transform square brackets and then put your name in. I put slots down. because that's good. This is going to hold all the transfer elements for all of the inventory slot objects. All right. I'm going to do public void method update buttons. Doesn't take anything. All right, and so this is going to run through all of the button objects, and then it's going to call slot cleared or slot filled. So this is where we're gonna use those functions. We're going to be calling those through here. So we're going to create a for loop for int I equals 0. And so if you don't know, I guess for loops. Basically, this is going to run through the all of the slots in our array. So it starts out at 0. We declare, I. It starts out at 0, and then as long as it's not equal to or greater than the length of the slot array, it'll keep adding. It'll keep incrementing one by one, and that way it'll go through all of them. All right. Now we're going to do an if statement. And then if I is less than inventory.items.count. And so then we're accessing that inventory singleton. We're going to be seeing, like, as long as I is less than the count of the inventory, which is also going to be 25 for this, but you're going to be able to change it. So we're just going to check that. So just as long as it's not as long as it's not less than 25, it'll keep going through it as it's going through all the slots. All right, and then we're going to access slots, the element I at slots. So this is accessing the component that's in the index that the I is currently the number of. All right. So get component. We're going to put inventory slot here in these brackets. We're going to be accessing that inventory slot object, and then we're going to call the method slot filled. So dot slot filled, and then inventory.items, and then also I inside of square brackets. So it's going to set the inventory slot. It's going to call that slot filled, and it's going to pass the item from the inventory the same spot in the inventory array. All right, and then else. We're going to do the same thing again. Slots I dot get component. And then we're going to do dot slot clear. So yeah, we're just going to do the same thing here. Get component inventory slot, and then dot slot clear. So we're calling that function now. So if there's no item in there in our inventory, count, because count is like the current amount of items in the inventory. Yeah. So then it'll set it to clear. So nothing will be in it. All right. And then we're just going to set slots I. We're going to get to the button component because we don't want the button to be activated when we're not using it, when it's not enabled. So all right, so then like we said before, we're going to be disabling this component, the button component of the slot. So we can just put down whatever Boolean we're going to want in here. So we're also going to have if I is less than inventory dot items dot count. So if I is less than that, it'll enable it. Otherwise, it's going to be disabled because this will be false. And so that way we can't press buttons for empty slots and then have like, like the maybe invisible image showing up in our hand. All right, and then lastly, we can delete this update function because we're not going to be using it. And then we're also going to change start to awake here because we're going to be accessing stuff inside of the object. All right, so we're going to want to set these slots. We're going to want to set the slots array. We're going to want to instantiate that. So a new transform array. But then for the amount of elements inside of it, we're going to do items parent dot child count. And so this items parent transform is going to be our pause menu. It's going to be the inventory grid because that way we have that to reference all of its children objects to run through them here. So this just like gives us the number of how many children it has, which is going to be 25 because we have 25 buttons. All right, now we're going to add another for loop here. Same deal here. Type in the same stuff. If int I is equal to 0, or set int I equal to 0. Then if I is less than items parent dot child count. So this is gonna be going through all of the children in the items parent transform. We're gonna set slots, the I index of slots into items parent dot get child. So this is actually like where we actually instantiate all of these transform elements. So that when you use get child here, this is basically works like how we would an array. You use parentheses here, but the I is for like the index. So as it goes from 0 to 24, and it'll get all of those button child objects. All right, and then down here, this is kind of like just for like the inventory system I have. I'm gonna set inventory equal to inventory.instance. So like that. This is for like my kind of like singleton dealio. Ideally, I wouldn't have this in here. And then here is this is how update buttons are going to be called because we're going to be this is going to be like calling update buttons when we get new items and such. And so these are for like the inventory system, which is kind of out of the scope of this tutorial, but they need to be in this script. So, all right. So now that script is done now. We can now add this as a component in pause menu. Items parent, we can drop down here and then drag inventory grid into items parent. And then that's it for that. Now, lastly, we just need to go into the pause script. All right, so we don't even need to change these variables at all. We're just going to be adding one last thing to have the UI be updated. And then we're going to call it update buttons function. Update buttons. So that way, every time when we pause, it'll call this method from the inventory UI component. So then it'll update all those buttons every time we pause or unpause. We don't need it updating constantly. The inventory is going to be updated constantly, but the buttons don't need to be updated unless you're seeing them on the screen. So putting them a part of this was the easiest way to do it. So lastly, yeah, that's so make sure you have the pause menu dragged in here. Also, this is like due to like my issue with this program, but drag the inventory script into this game manager also. There's like an issue I had with like the way it was like importing. But the inventory script should be next to inventory slot and then action text. If you just drag that in there, and then click play, we got it working. We got picked up scroll. You can equip it, unequip it. If you pause again, like before, we kind of had those two items. Pick up a sword, and it kind of looks janky, but you have that here. I'm gonna look at what people are saying.
So there hasn't been a ton of activity in chat. Don't worry, all.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Sweet. Yeah. Sweet. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Anyone? Any questions regarding stuff? Are you guys programs working? Anything we need to go over again?
Chat doesn't always have a tendency to be very active, but don't worry too much about that if there aren't any responses. We're mainly just here to get that video recording for later reference anyway. But
sure, yeah.
Yeah, I think people in chat are doing okay. Is that everything you had for today, or?
Yep. Yeah, that's what I had.
All right. So, thanks so much for coming out and talking to us today. Jacob, I just realized, Jason, I should probably add you back to the stream.
No problem.
All right, sweet. That's awesome.
Yeah, you saw that. Yeah, so to you guys who are watching the recording, or to anyone who showed up late or anything like that, make sure to show up for office hours later this week. Besides that, we will see you next week. Is there any homework for this week, or no?
Nope.
No? All right, then. Talk to you guys later.
Yeah, sweet. And I'll let you guys know when my office hours are soon. Those aren't quite decided yet. So, yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye, everyone.